Hello, and welcome to our presentation entitled Engaging Children with Visual Impairments Through Early Literacy Storybox Activities. I'm Megan Ferran, a speech language pathologist at Perkins. I started at Perkins 9 years ago as a co-op student from Northeastern working as a classroom TA, and Valerie was my mentor at the time. And now 6 years later, I came back to work at Perkins as an SLP.
And I'm Valerie Manchester, former classroom teacher and the current art teacher at Perkins as well. I've been at Perkins for 16 years, and during my time as a classroom teacher, I was asked to participate in Northeastern's cooperative educational program. And my very first co-op student was Megan. We've worked together serving Perkins students then and now. We're both passionate about working as a part of each student's team and also passionate about story boxes. We put together the following presentation to share with you our enthusiasm for story boxes. Story boxes, you say? Well, let's get on with it. Think about it. If you read just one book a day to your child or to your children, that would be 365 books a year, and 1,095 books by the time your child or your children turns 3 years old. So 2,190 stories by the age of 6 years. And by this time, you've offered invaluable opportunities and experiences for your children to become lovers of reading and books. Okay, so now imagine a child with visual impairments engaging with those same hundreds of books by simply adding a few functional and realistic objects for your child to hold and explore. You have opened up their world a little bit bigger. Not only are they listening to the words, but now they have a part of the story, a piece of the literacy adventure to connect with.
So now we will dive into chapter 1 of our presentation, What is a Story Box? So in this picture, you'll see a story box for a book about my treasures. And there is a little box, a container with some story box items inside that are related to the story. Some coins, some acorns, a little star, and a stuffed animal that all correlate or represent items in the story. So what are story boxes or story bags, bins, baskets, trays? They can be held in a variety of containers. They are multisensory interactive ways for students to engage in early literacy activities with teachers, caregivers, family, and friends. So these sensory channels that are used in story boxes can be vision, touch, hearing, smell, even taste can be incorporated into story box activities. Story boxes also contain a collection of relevant items that pertain to an existing story, like the one we saw in the previous slide in the picture. And they allow students with visual impairments to access literacy in a meaningful way through various sensory channels and build positive experiences with reading. They also help to convey vocabulary words and their meaning to children with visual impairments through hands-on experience in a way that they can hold in their hands or smell with their noses. And we know that sighted children have incidental learning experiences all the time, and it's important that we provide these same experiences for children with visual impairments. Story boxes can also be a way to introduce early literacy and Braille concepts, such as reading left to right, turning pages, orienting to books, talking about characters or different story elements, things like that. So here is an example story box. It's about a story called Camille and the Sunflowers. And it's a story that Valerie used in the art room as part of a month-long Vincent van Gogh lesson this year about a young girl who meets a man who has a yellow beard and wears a straw hat, and it ends up being Vincent van Gogh. And some events from the story include that Camille picks sunflowers for him and puts them in a vase. The man paints, and the story describes the smells, articles of clothing, different colors that he paints with. And so this is just one example of how story boxes can contain relevant items that you might even be able to find around your house. A hat or some flowers or a vase, things like that. It doesn't have to be anything crazy that you have to go out and buy. And so now Valerie will show some photos of students interacting with Storybox materials as part of the lesson. And some of these photos do depict older students, but Storyboxes can be used for literacy activities with individuals of all ages.
So whether you're in a classroom or in a speech session or at home, providing children with simple objects enhances the literacy experience. So in the art room, each month we have a new theme, and related to that theme, I create a story box to accompany the month's lesson. So here, for example, in January, we were learning about Vincent van Gogh, just like Megan had mentioned, and I chose a relevant story and found simple items to go along with that story. Van Gogh's straw hat, which the kids all had fun putting on, paintbrushes and paint, as well as a pot that was referenced in the book. They were all readily available items that students like Max and Gary were interested in exploring.
And another example of a story box that was used in the art room this year was Possum's Harvest Moon. It is about a possum who decides to throw one last party before winter comes. So this story box that's pictured here contains relevant items to the story, including a stuffed animal possum, some leaves, seeds, a party hat, and an illuminated moon that you can see hanging here on the black background, which is nice for our students with CVI. So building story boxes like this can create a nice opportunity to include your child in helping to create your story box. For example, with leaves or seeds or flowers, they can help by joining you on a walk outside to look for leaves and things like that. Other story boxes might contain things like cinnamon or lotion or soap, items with different colors or textures and smells that can help create a full sensory experience and help with vocabulary development. And we'll talk more later about how to make story boxes of your own. So here are some students engaging with this story box.
Okay, these two photos show that both Jaxie and Kenzie really enjoyed checking out all the elements of the story box: the seeds, the party hat, as well as the autumn leaves. And like Megan said, as an added bonus, I found an illuminated moon that was placed on a blackboard to support children with CVI. And obviously this isn't something that we would have readily available at home or at school, but finding simple items online can enhance the story boxes as well. Okay, chapter 2. It may be clear at this point in our presentation that Megan and I are really fond of story boxes. And in this slide, the photo shows just how much fun sharing story box objects can be. This photo is of Kevin, a student that Megan and I served together for 4 years, both as his speech and language pathologist, as well as his classroom teacher. He's holding a representational object that is of a small evergreen tree, and his expression is one of pure delight. So we thought we would give some simple explanations of just why it is that we like to create and use story boxes so much. Ten reasons why we love story boxes, and also story bags and bins and baskets and trays. Number 1, story boxes connect children and children with visual impairments to literature by providing physical and representational objects. Number 2, story boxes can be made as simple or as elaborate as the story's content. Number 3, story boxes can be created based on the child's age, interests, and/or abilities. Number 4, story boxes can include exclusively real objects, right? Balls, spoons, monies, or exclusively representational objects, stuffed animals, toy vehicles, plastic fruit, or a combination of both. But we both find, Megan and I, that it's important to make sure you're explaining to the child that you're reading the book to, if it's a plastic fruit, to say that it's a plastic fruit, or if it's a toy car, to make sure you say it's a toy car so that they know it's not actually a car. Number 5, story boxes can have added extra, for example, recorded switches to provide an auditory opportunity to hear the sounds of laughter or the jingle of coins or the applause of an audience. Sensory items that offer fragrance can also be included: spices, Elmer's glue, herbs such as lavender and clove, and they're also important to foster connections to the text and to the content of the story. Tactile symbols can support the story's content as well: symbols for sick or friends or even summer. And Braille labeling of objects and the words from the book itself, whatever the story's content is describing.
So some more reasons that we love story boxes. Number 6 is that they can be used across disciplines in a school setting. So they can be used in the classroom, in a speech session, as part of a cooking or art activity, as we saw photos of before. This photo is of a student and her teacher exploring a schedule related to a story in the classroom. Story boxes can also be explored in a one-to-one setting, such as a therapy session or with a parent or guardian or staff member. They can be used in group settings in the classroom, for example, or even practicing taking turns, passing materials and engaging socially with their peers. And story boxes can even be enjoyed individually. One example of this is maybe the child is listening to the story electronically while exploring items more independently from the story box. The 8th reason why we love story boxes is that children's communication can be supported through any story box activity. We can do this in a variety of ways, but some include by adding elements of the story or book to the child's communication device, using different communication modalities to answer related questions from the story, to make social connections with peers or family members, etc. Number 9, the 9th reason that we love story boxes is that CVI accommodations can be implemented when creating or engaging with a story box. So we can set items on a black tray or just a plain colored tray, using a flashlight to highlight an object that we are describing. Another great way to accommodate for CVI while reading a story box is to reduce visual clutter and help guide students' visual attention to the item at hand. So we can do this by putting up a black tri-wall and helping to keep extra items out of the student's visual field by putting them behind them or behind the tri-wall if you're using one. And number 10 is that children of all ages love to explore story boxes. And as we'll see in our next slide, Kevin will be back in action to demonstrate a really successful story box reading activity. And reading a story box looks different for every student, and it's really important to keep that in mind. It depends on their level of independence and their communication styles, but Kevin really enjoys interacting with materials and sometimes reading the story along with us. So here we have Kevin again, and he and I were reading The Little Old Lady Who Was Not Afraid of Anything during a one-to-one speech session in the fall of 2020, I believe. And Kevin was really enjoying the sounds in the story, and he was having a great time exploring the different story box items. 2 shoes go clump, clump. Clump, clump. Clumpity clump. Clump. Clumpity clump. Clump. A little further on, the old lady stumbled into a pair of pants. And the pants went wiggle, wiggle. Wiggle, wiggle. Get out of my way, you pair of pants. I'm not afraid of you, said the little old lady. She walked on, but behind her she could hear 2 shoes go clump, 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 and one pair of pants go wiggle, 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 wiggle. So this is the bonus reason why we love story boxes. They are so much fun. And you'll see that I changed around and added some words to the story based on what appeared to be motivating for Kevin at the time. And this helps to keep up his engagement and just maximize his learning opportunities during that session. And earlier in the reading of this story, I helped Kevin explore the items by labeling them, talking about their function, different salient features, things like that. And we'll talk more about story box implementation a little later on in terms of reading them and exploring the items. Chapter 3 in our presentation is a short one that highlights the research supporting family engagement in early literacy for all children, including those with developmental disabilities. And so there was a research study from 2006 that stated that literacy activities are varied and go beyond book reading. And this is especially applicable for students with visual impairments, especially when we think about the incidental learning opportunities that I was talking about before, and just making it a full sensory experience. Research has also indicated that there are no significant differences in the frequency of home literacy activities for children with and without disabilities. However, it is really important that literacy activities are tailored to each individual child's needs, especially those with disabilities. And we also know from the 2006 study that learning occurs over time and through active engagement. So therefore, children must be exposed early and often to literacy building experiences. So as we've talked about, this might look quite different for children with visual impairments who might not have as many opportunities for incidental learning as their sighted peers. And so that is a reason that it's really important to implement meaningful story boxes for our students in early literacy activities.
Chapter 4 of our story. We called this Flexibility and Versatility. Next, we'd like to share with you the why and the hows of using story boxes. So on this slide, you'll see a photo of a story box called The Stolen Smell. And this was a really fun story box to put together and to share with the students because it was a multi-sensory approach that we used. There was cinnamon for smelling and coins in a little bag for jingling and some recorded laughter that the students really had fun pressing a little mini switch that was recorded with laughter. You're all here today watching this presentation because you have an interest in early literacy and also an interest in learning additional ways to support your child's literacy experiences. So let's talk about that. As educators of children with visual impairments, we have gained a deep appreciation for a really good story box. We've learned that a story box can be the lesson or that a story box can accompany the lesson. A story box can be used in the classroom, in a speech session, as an engaging piece of art or music or mobility and orientation lesson, or a part of a collection that can be shared amongst staff and students. Families can create their own home library too. In the Early Learning Center Lower School at Perkins, we're fortunate to have staff that share our passion. Our library has been transformed to more than just a space for reading. Our library is now home to a diverse collection of story boxes and story bags that are available for use by staff in the program. A professional development committee was formed this year to keep our collection intact, evolving, and updated. Many of our story boxes provide area of the curriculum supplements to the state's curriculum. Additionally, elements of the expanded core curriculum can be addressed when a child is engaging in a story box experience. In the speech suite, another remarkable collection of story bins are also available for therapists and teachers alike to use as or with lessons. Over the years, our lower school speech and language pathologists have collaborated to put together a variety of story boxes to be used by therapists and teachers alike. However, one of the main reasons for this presentation today is to share with families not only the importance of supporting literacy times with functional and realistic objects, but to show you just how simple items you have in your home can increase opportunities for learning, exploring, and engagement for your child.
Now on to chapter 5, where we'll share some ideas for how to build your own story boxes or bags or trays. And they can be contained, like I mentioned before, in a variety of containers. This one is just a little plastic Sterilite container. Can be used with or without a lid. Lids can be helpful because they can make them more stackable if you're having a collection or a library of story boxes. You can also use Ziploc bags, shoe boxes, things like that. This is a story box about a summer story, and there is a photo on this slide of a towel, a pair of pants, a shirt. That's our sunny visual tangible symbol. It has a pair of sunglasses on it, a water bottle, sunblock, and a helmet for bike riding, and also our swimming symbol, which is a little towel. So when we're thinking about selecting a story to make a story box for, you want to think first about what motivates your child, and story boxes can be made for any story. You might choose to create one based on a theme or a season, like the summer box we just saw, a routine such as bath time, or a preference. What's your child's favorite story? It can be helpful to select stories that incorporate concrete concepts, characters, or items that can be represented by objects. These are often sort of the most straightforward story boxes to build. But you can even make your own stories that are specific to your child, such as an About Me story box, or a story box that revolves around specific routines or things like that. And an About Me story box might contain personal information, their name, their age, favorite activities or toys, people in their family. You can use things like at Perkins, a lot of our students have name tangible symbols with something that represents them. So if a student wears bows in their hair a lot, their name symbol might be a bow. So maybe there could be different name symbols for members of the family in the story box, or just objects that might represent a person, or real objects that might represent their routines or favorite items. And when you're building the story box itself, it comes time to select corresponding items to the story. So many story box items, like we've talked about, can be purchased. However, you may also be able to find items in your home for many stories, like cinnamon or paint or art supplies or pasta, things like that. And then you can place the book and items into a storage container, a box, or a bag, like we've talked about. And it can be helpful to find a central location to keep all of your story boxes as you start to build your library. And if possible, you can label the container with a tactile marker that's relevant to the story. So for example, an example I've seen is Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and there's a little sort of tuft of fur on the box that labels it and represents the three bears. And one thing to be careful about, as Valerie mentioned earlier, is that when you're using miniatures, so for example, if you're reading a story about a car or that contains a car in it, you can use a toy car, but be sure to describe to your learner that it's a toy. Children with visual impairments may be more familiar with other aspects of the car that they engage more readily with, such as the seatbelt or their car seat. So it's important to provide them with the information about miniatures as needed or applicable, that it's just a toy car, for example. And when you're reading the story, take your time, just like in the video with Kevin. We slowed down and did it the way he was interested in. And you can utilize the story box objects one at a time and give your child time to explore each item freely. You can even do this before you start reading the story. And then as you're reading, you can present each item as it's mentioned in the story. And while reading or before reading, you may also want to describe the items to your child as they're exploring them using salient feature language, or describing or even demonstrating the use of the item. And you can demonstrate this yourself, or you can help maybe with hand under hand support for your child to explore the use of the item as well. And then, of course, have fun. And at the end of the story, your child can help you place the items back into the box or bag and close it up to help create a clear sense of closure on the activity. And again, especially, I mean, for all children with visual impairments, but especially those with CVI, try to keep the environment as clutter-free as possible so that they can get as much out of the experience as possible.
Okay, so it's apparent that there's no limit to the creativity you can bring to the table when you're making your own story boxes at home. And some guidelines that we have found successful include, for younger children, keeping it simple with just a few items and limit the amount of extra sensory objects that you include. And as your child or children gets older and their interests may increase, you be the judge. The possibilities are endless. So on this screen, we have a list of some favorite stories that have some fun objects that go along with the stories. So for, Goodnight Moon, it could be a telephone and not a cell phone. It would have to be an actual telephone, right? A clock, a comb, a toy mouse. For the Very Hungry Caterpillar, which is a big favorite, all of the food that goes along with it. And you could actually have the actual food or representational food, but obviously be sure to describe what it is, whether it's a real piece of food or a toy fruit. Green eggs and ham is a big favorite here at Perkins, and a lot of things can be incorporated with that. And we've even had classes where we made the green eggs and ham and in the teaching kitchen and cooked with the students. But you know, a tree, a train, a goat, the yes symbol. There's a lot of fun objects that can go in the story boxes. And again, like Megan has said, most of the stuff you can find at home. And if it's just 2 or 3 objects, that's good enough for a story box. Okay, story boxes in the news, chapter 6. So we found a fun article from the Boston Globe, and quoted in the article, it says, reading a story box is a traditional family activity, but for students who are blind or visually impaired, having concepts of what some things are is challenging. And that was a direct quote from Terry Turgan. She is our Perkins Education Director of Community Programs. Terry collaborated with a 16-year-old who was working on his Eagle Scout project. And the Scout decided a meaningful personal thing he could do was to create some story boxes that children at Perkins could enjoy. As a young child, the now Eagle Scout had been introduced to the story box concept here at Perkins to support some vision challenges he had faced. And the Scout understands that one goal of a story box is to give the child, listening or reading, the opportunity to tactually explore the objects in the story that they might not be familiar with. So we have included the link of the article at the end of the program so that you can read the article. It's pretty great to see how full circle the activity came when he was just a little guy, and now he's a full Eagle Scout. That's the end of our presentation, and it's your turn. If you're interested in jumpstarting your story box journey, please send your child's name and address to me at valeriemanchester@perkins.org, and we'll be happy to assemble and send you a special edition story bag as a takeaway from this presentation.
Here are some of the resources that we used for our research basis, and also the link to the Boston Globe article. And thank you for tuning into our presentation.
Yep, we hope you enjoyed it as much as we enjoyed putting it together, and as much as we enjoy story boxes here at Perkins.
So welcome back. We thought it would be fun to show you just exactly how simple it really is to make a story bag. And this is the actual story bag that we will be sending you if you're interested in having a story bag sent home to you after being so enthralled with our presentation. So the story's called, that we chose, At the Library. So I'll pass that to Megan. And we think that before you begin the story, take everything out of your story bag, right? So that you're not dealing with it later. And like Megan mentioned in the presentation, give your child a chance to explore some of the objects before you start reading the story that are in the story box. So if we want to talk about a notebook and a marker right there in the story, we'd put them on a black tray.
I can explore them. I can take the cap off. I can smell it. I can open the notebook and write with it. And this is also a good opportunity to use some CBI accommodations, like highlighting with a flashlight. And also, I wanted to mention some of our symbols that we have. So these are our 3D visual tangible symbols, and they can be used for, this is our library symbol. So it is a stack of books that represent a stack of books that you might see at the library. We also have our friends symbol. It's hard to see on a recording on the computer, but that's our friends symbol. And so we incorporate symbols into our students' schedules, into their daily routines, and also into our story boxes. You can also use real objects as symbol representations as well.
That's true. Okay, so we'll start by reading At the Library.
At the Library, written by Keith and Sarah Cormartin and illustrated by Ivica Stevanovic. Kids can do a lot at the library. So we can hold up our library symbol. I can check it out with my hands. I can look at it. I can feel the books. Kids can read books at the library.
Put it on the tray again, just visual. Sorry, I should be showing you. I'm not Megan. She knows what the book looks like. It's hard to see.
So this is a miniature representation of this story actually. So we can look at it and flip the pages and see the actual photos from the same story. This is an example of a miniature that it might be worth saying this is a small book, or this is an example of a miniature book, especially because it's also just made of paper. So you can say this is a paper book.
Right.
Kids can make art at the library.
So what Megan has noted earlier is that we really try to be CVI friendly. So again, using a black background and then red or red and black objects, and then highlighting them with the light. But again, this is a fun little red paintbrush that they can check out, feel, explore, and it represents what they're talking about in the story.
Yep.
Kids can make art at the library.
And it can be any color too. It could be as long as it's high contrast.
High contrast,
Yeah.
right? Thank you.
And a simple background is good too. Kids can listen to stories at the library. Yep, did that one. Kids can play games at the library.
So this is fun. You would have a game piece or an actual game at home that they can, again, check out, make connections to.
This might be especially good if there's a game that your child likes to play, or a toy that they like to play with, or something that they could use if you were building your own story box, for example. You could use a piece of something from your own home. Kids can write stories at the library.
Right, again, so they're talking about the notebook, the pen, not forgetting to highlight.
Kids can make friends at the library.
And so some concepts are difficult to have objects to represent, and that's why we're fortunate at Perkins where we have a library full of tangible symbols. So some pages of your story, you may not have an object to go with it, and that's okay too. But if you can, be creative and think of ways to describe friends, talk about friends, or have a friend symbol made.
The library is a fun place to visit. And this is a page that we did not have an object for, but there are many different ways to represent fun as well.
And we could also, conclude the story with the library symbol again. So you can use objects more than once.
So that is the end of the story. So we could close it up, say the end.
And at school, we use a finish symbol, right? So when you're done with something, it goes in the finished bin. And so we actually don't need to put it in the finished bin, but the child can check out the finished bin.
Yep. And then like I talked about earlier in the presentation, it's a good opportunity to help close the activity by labeling it as finished and putting everything away. So even if it's in a bin, you can put it in the bin, or have your child help you put it back into the bag and close it up so that they know that the activity is finished.
All right, so if you're interested in us making you a story bag and sending it along home to your child, follow the link.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.